Welcome to day 32 of Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. Today we're going to finish up the chapter on developing your strategy. And if you remember from yesterday, Rick Warren was talking about the survey that he was doing in order to reach people. He's talking about fishing, and he's talking about really trying to get inside the heads of the people that you're trying to reach. Think like them and understand what are their needs and concerns and fears. So after doing the survey, he came up with 4 basic complaints about churches in general. The first one is that church is boring, especially the sermons. The messages don't relate to my life. He says, this is the complaint I heard the most. It is amazing how churches are able to take the most exciting book in the world and bore people to tears with it. From this complaint, I determined to learn how to communicate God's word in a practical, interesting way. A sermon does not have to be boring to be biblical, and it doesn't have to be dry to be doctrinal. The unchurched aren't asking for watered-down messages, just practical ones. They want to hear something on Sunday they can apply on Monday. I think that is so true. The next one is that church members are unfriendly to visitors. If I go to church, I want to feel welcomed without feeling embarrassed. So this oftentimes comes down to having certain expectations of guests or kind of calling them out or pointing them out. The next one is the church is more interested in my money than in me. I think that's very self-explanatory. But one thing that they did in order to address that concern ahead of time was that when they do an offering for guests, they tell them that the offering is something that members of the congregation do. They're not expected to give. And then lastly, they worry about the quality of the church's childcare. So this obviously applies to people with young children, young families, which are the kind of people we definitely want to attract to our community. He says the church must earn the trust of parents. Saddleback has adopted and published a set of stringent guidelines for our children's ministry to ensure safety and quality. If you want to reach young couples, you must have an excellent program for their children. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if this needs to be said, but I think that there's concern among young parents about the way that churches have taken care of children in the past, and they don't know what kind of quality there really is. And a lot of parents aren't interested in putting their kids in some low quality kind of program just so that they can attend the service. So that's an important consideration too. He goes on to talk more and more about fishing and about the necessity of being able to get where people are at, trying to um, really understand, think like the people that you're trying to reach out to. And that includes what he calls reading the defense, which means that you try to you get into that mindset and you figure what are the barriers, what are the objections, or what are the fears that are going to come across, and then try to proactively address those things before they even come, like in preparation for them. He shares in here his letter that he wrote to like, I think he said he sent it to 10,000 people, and it's all based on the survey results. So that's definitely a letter worth reading. I would recommend you read that. It's on page 194. And then he says, this is the heart of Saddleback's evangelism strategy. We must be willing to catch fish on their own terms. Successful fishing often requires doing things that are uncomfortable in order to get the fish. And he goes on to talk more about what Jesus' example was, and how when he talked with the different people, he always talked to them on their level. He talked about not letting cultural differences get in the way of being able to get our message out. And even sometimes we might have to make cultural concessions. For example, they say that at Saddleback, because the culture there is that people dress pretty casually and informally, that's the way they've adopted for their services. He says if you see men in suits and ties at Saddleback, they're likely to be out-of-town visitors. And he continues to talk about it. He talks about the importance of addressing where people's hurts and needs are. He talks about how Jesus, really focusing on dealing with healing people, not just preaching to them, but also feeding and healing and trying to helping people wherever their needs were shared. He says that when you are in pain, either physically or emotionally, you aren't interested in the meaning of Greek and Hebrew words. You just want to get well. If your church is serious about reaching the unchurched, You must be willing to put up with people who have a lot of problems. Fishing is often messy and smelly. Many churches want the fish they catch to be already scaled, gutted, cleaned, and cooked, and that is why they never reach anyone. Especially these days, we want to reach young people. A lot of young people have, I don't know, what's the word to say? According to him, a lot of problems. And, we have to recognize that everyone we bring in is going to have some kind of problem, have some kind of difficulty, challenge, resentments that, if we really want those people, then we have to be willing to take care of and support them in their life journey as well. And we have to be willing to change our methods when necessary. We have to be willing to offer choices. The world we live in has a lot of choices. We can offer a couple different services, a couple different times, a couple different forms. He says if you've ever fished for an entire day, you know that sometimes you have to change the bait every once in a while. He says sometimes the greatest enemy to our success in the future is often the success of our past. Continually trying to do the thing that we did in the past that worked but doesn't work anymore. And then he talks about the importance of spending money, and how, if and any effective evangelism program is probably going to cost some amount of money. And he says not to worry so much, about if you're really doing the right thing and you're really reaching people, then you shouldn't need to stress out about money. So that is the end of this chapter. Tomorrow we're going to look at part 4, and we're making good. We're past halfway point in the book. So I look forward to tomorrow.